Hello, welcome to our next class about the history of philosophy. And today we're gonna talk about the last pagan theories, which are not actually the last pagan theories. The next theories that we're gonna see are actually pagan too, but they are like I consider them the bridge between Christian philosophy and pagan philosophy because just a spoiler, next class is about Neoplatonism, and Neoplatonism has lots of Christian elements, so I cannot see it as the same as Stoicism or Skepticism that are clearly like Stoicism. Even Stoicism gets related to Christianism a lot in this last part, Neo Stoicism, right? Because it's Christianism were a big thing by the time when Jesus come, and there was no way of not being influenced by it. But I consider that these theories are the last pagan theories, and then Neoplatonism, I consider it like half Christian. So though these are the theories that I consider more pagan theories actually. But yeah, that's an arbitrary definition, right? And they are Neo-Stoicism, Neo-Skepticism, Neo-Aristotelianism, and the rising of Neoplatonism. And the rising of Neoplatonism is basically Middle Platonism, which is one stage of Platonism in philosophy, and Neo-Pythagoreanism. So today we're talking about the Neo stuff because it's the last steps, right? That's why it's everything. It's a neo everything. So let's go, and we're beginning with neo stoicism. I firstly I'm sorry for the small letters. I suppose that if someone is watching it in the cell phone, the the words are quite hard to read, but I couldn't divide this slide in a better way. So that's what we have for today. And first, we have Seneca. Seneca is probably, I can't say it is the most important. All the three philosophers are very important actually, but Seneca is very influenced by the valorization of reason, right? If you remember the ancient Stoicism, the early Stoicism, we remember that they say that everything is indifferent besides the things that happen on our psychological world, correct? This inner existence is what really is actually important, and the external existence is indifferent, right? So he is very in right, he is very influenced by it, and that's why he considers psychology the most important area, because if all the relevant parts of our life and all the morally important actions are related to our minds, we need to dive into our minds and study it. He gets Seneca has a little Platonism on its theories, right? He does not like truly argues in favor of Platonic dualism, right? He does not say, oh, the soul is not made by the same nature of the body, but he divides the soul and the body in a way that it really seems Platonic, right? It really seems that he's talking about a very different nature, that he's not talking about matter anymore, but he is still Stoic and he still believes in Stoic physics, in which the soul is made of matter just as the body, right? The soul actually is a body. And he develops two very, very, very important concepts, which are will and conscience. Will here on ancient philosophy is the other element of our minds that is not rationality, right? So, it, well, it I think anyone will agree that instead of buying a shirt, we could buy we could donate to charity, give food for one that is hungry. But even everyone agreeing with that, people still buy shirts. And everyone that you see in the world that have already bought a shirt, he or she is clearly wrong. And they all agree with that. They all agree that getting that same money and donating to charity was better. But their will still wants the shirt. The will is the part of our minds that want things. And wanting is not necessarily related to comprehending and to understanding. And if you remember Socrates and Plato saying that it is not possible to make the wrong decision if you know the correct thing to do, because they thought, oh, if you can see that, okay, you can recognize that this one is better than that one, you do this one. But Seneca says that it's not always like that. He says that our will, this our wanting side, is different from our rational side. And this is how psychology is going to be divided for a long time. And today, in common sense at least, we still kind of divide our minds in these two very big aspects, rational and emotional, um, intellect and will. And he talks about conscience, about this. Today it is quite obvious, like it is quite an easy concept to grasp. It's when something comprehends what this something is, correct? This something has a conscience. And Seneca was the first one to say, oh, that's the criteria for something to be an individual. That's the criteria for something to, not be a normal object. And this idea is still relevant until today, right? If you think about, I don't know, abortion or any topic that is related to debating if something is or not an individual, if you talk about uh, animal rights too, people constantly argue that a fetus or an animal should just be considered if this being has conscience. So yeah, here is Seneca's theory. Obviously changed along history. And he's also saying that the logos made us alike, so we should treat everyone the same. That's his argument against slavery, right? The Stoics had an argument against slavery, saying that the only thing that can make one slave is being dumb or being ignorant, and the only thing that can make someone free is wisdom. So there's no sense in limiting one's freedom, like physically. That was the ancient Stoic argument, in broadly speaking. And now the neo-Stoic argument, the Seneca's argument, is that following the logos and following God's will is treating people the same, because God made people alike. Right? People are different from each other, but we're like 99% alike. So there's no sense in slavery. And here is actually him saying that slavery is bad. Slavery is against God. Slavery is against what is good. So, because the first argument, the early Stoic argument, does not actually say that slavery is bad. It just says that it's nonsense. Here he puts it in this strong word, like slavery is against God. And then we have Epictetus, the second philosopher. And in fun fact, he is not that fun, but yeah, he was a slave, right? So that's really interesting, because we would think, looking at his theories, that he is the most ideal one and the most unrealistic one, because Epictetus say that the life is too good. Life is not that good. But he was actually a slave, so he has this very powerful argument of saying what he say. Well, I'm going to explain his theories and then I'll come back in this topic. Some things depend on us, others don't, obviously. Good and evil is always on the first group. Remember, our psychological existence is similar to God. So the intellect is the most important part, right? Now, not only the intellect and the will, but this came with Seneca. And so our mind is the most important part. So everyone that is good or bad, because everyone that strongly go against God or strongly fits into God, into the fate, right, into God's plan, is on our minds, because our minds are more God, so they're more existing. So making truly significant good and evil is on our minds. That's basic ancient Stoic theory. And then he says that pro. I hope I can say it correctly, pronounce it correctly. So prohieresis is the rational choice you make between the first and the second group, and is the main aspect of one's essence. Right? He says that everyone decides if they want to live uh, for the physical world or the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, we have good and evil, and we can perceive good because everything on this area depends on us. The spiritual world is the group of things that depends on us. And the physical world does not depend on us at all. So if you put your happiness in the physical world, you're actually putting only unhappiness. You're actually choosing to be miserable. Epictetus say that happiness is a choice. You can choose between being happy and miserable, between living your life for the external world or I'm sorry, for the internal world or the external world. That's basically Epictetus. And that's why I said that it is very interesting that he's a slave, because he say that, happiness is a choice. And you would think that a person who says that happiness is a choice is because have already has a good life, but I suppose a slave don't have a good life in any time in history. So that's it. And Marcus Aurelius, in a very strongly opposite, Marcus Aurelius were an emperor of Rome who lived a Stoic life and who developed Stoicism theoretically and practically too. So it gives a lot of it's when Stoicism gets really big, because the emperor, the most important person in the whole Roman Empire, is saying that the physical things does not matter, is saying that getting rich is not important. And so it is, it strikes people a lot to see that. Even today, if I want to begin a conversation saying that the one of the emperors of Rome was Stoic is it's very interesting for anyone to see that. It's strange, it's counterintuitive. And he say that there is an intellectual nature that is beyond our material soul, right? He actually makes the Platonist division between soul and body. Now the theory that was only on the background of Seneca's formulations is explicit on Marcus Aurelius. And he say that this, the not the metaphysical soul, is our true us, and only this should affect us. Since this is actually he makes a big he puts a limit between body and metaphysical soul, and he say that the metaphysical soul is actually similar to God, and God is not actually a body, he changes a lot of all the ancient ancient Stoic theories, most of it based on faith and most of it based on religious influences. Because, as I said, the metaphysical and the transcendental ideas were very popular by that time. So people didn't felt like they needed to prove it because it just seemed obvious, probably. And it's very common in those theories, like we're gonna see in Neo-Aristotelism, in Neo-Pythagoreanism, Middle Platonism. Just skepticism actually argues in favor of their theories, like completely. In general, they just make assumptions about transcendentals and about the metaphysical nature of stuff, because that was so popular. There was Plato, there was Aristotle, there was like Jesus Christ, who were literally alive by that time. And so those people felt safe to make some assumptions about that. But going back to the slide, this is our true us, right? And this is the only thing that should affect us. And only truth and falsehood is good and evil. This metaphysical soul is intellectual. So the only thing that should affect us are correct uh, beliefs and wrong beliefs, right? Truth and falsehood. Because that's the only true, you know, going against God action. That's the only true go in favor of God action. This action is actually studying. This action of doing the good is actually being correct, because the intellectual soul is the soul that is related to God. So he makes this, he say that moral and epistemology are kind of synonymous, and those areas are put together by Marcus Aurelius by saying that the only thing that has uh, moral relevance, moral consideration, is the intellectual nature of humans. So that was Neo-Stoicism, and now we're done with Stoicism. That's finally over. But skepticism is not over yet. Skepticism is still alive, right? Going against Stoicism. That's the classical Hellenistic conflict, right? Skepticism against Stoicism. And th- I said I'll try to pronounce it correctly because those names are quite hard. Ionesidemus says that it is impossible to say that something is more X than Y. And here, X and Y can be anything. It is impossible to say that something is more good than bad, to say that something is more red than blue, to say that something is more round than flat. I say that we cannot actually categorize things in any way, and we cannot affirm anything about nothing. He is a radical skeptic. And he pointed, right, 10 reasons for us to doubt any of our perceptions and intuitions. So he points 10 skeptic arguments. That's basically that. And those arguments there are good arguments, there are bad arguments. He calls it tropos, which means basically problems. He points problems with the existence and problems that cannot be solved, right? He says that, okay, if you say that you have hands, you cannot really see hands. You only have the experience of the whole phenomenon, that is the hand here, the computer behind it, with all the five senses together. You cannot say that all those five senses that are so different and don't have any qualitative property in common, are related to the same thing. And you cannot put a clear division between the hand and the computer. because both are in the same phenomenon. You experience everything in phenomenons, in complete phenomenons, and we cannot divide anything. That's I mixed two of the arguments. Actually, the argument of the five senses being different is other argument. They also argue that okay, you can have a visual, you can see your hand and say, okay, I have hands, here is the hand. But different animals see things in different ways, and you cannot say that one way of seeing, one sense is just better than the other. One sense is correct, the other is false. No, we have a bunch of animals seeing, having the five senses in various different ways, and there's not a correct one. That it does not make sense to say that, oh, our perception, our empirical perception is correct. This does not make any sense for skeptics, right? And I could say all the 10 reasons, but I don't think it's quite relevant. They're very basic. They say, oh, different cultures have different comprehension. This is one of the 10 arguments, right? But he also argues that there is no causality. He points more reasons. He makes another tropos that he says that is this group. He divides his philosophy in groups of arguments, and he makes another group of arguments against causality, which he basically says that we see two things together and we say that they one caused the other, but we don't have any justification for that. And without causality, we can't argue that phenomena are caused by entities, i.e., we can't say nothing about the world, right? If we cannot prove the eternal validation of causality, of causality as a principle for everything, we cannot say that the image of my hand is related to an actual hand. So we can truly just talk about those phenomena. There are nothing. There are just signals from the world. And we can never talk about the things on itself because we cannot prove that causality is correct as a principle, as an eternal principle and metaphysical, a relevant metaphysical category. And Anesidemus believes in a world similar to Heraclitus' harmonic chaos. So he says that we cannot know anything, things are just happening in a way that they seem that organized, right? And this is very similar to what Heraclitus say. He says that the chaos of the world and the intense movement creates this image and this impression of harmony, but actually things are always moving. And then this philosopher says that everything is not organized, anything has any causal relation, which means everything has any order in general, but they still seem to have this causal relations and disorder. He does not say that things don't seem to be like that. So that's how he, metaphysically, if he had a metaphysics, that's how he would point how the world is organized. It's organized by this seemings of organization. Then we have Cestus Empiricus, which is very relevant. He has just a small theory, right? You can see that the paragraph is not that big, but he is very important. Phenomena are modifications on us, and we can know those, but not external stuff, right? He says that phenomena are how the things on itself change us. So my hand again, it putting photons on my eye, and my eye is being hit by these photons, which causes on me the image of the hand, right? It's a modification that the hand make on me. If the touch is the most clear way of comprehending it. And we can know those because those are like ourselves. We can know ourselves. Cestus Empiricus believe that if something is on ourselves, we are able to comprehend it. We just can't prove the existence of external objects. We cannot prove the existence of my hand, but we can prove that my hand is affecting me, right? And he connects then skepticism and empiricism, a connection that is going to stay like that for a long time. If we think about Hume, which is a modern philosopher, a very relevant modern philosopher, he also makes this connection between skepticism and empiricism, right? And I think until nowadays, empiricists are mostly not mostly skeptics, because skepticism is very unpopular, but most of the skeptics are empiricists. And we don't need he connects those things because he says that we can only know the phenomena, so everything we have is empiric information. So empiric information is what we need to base all our theories and all our thoughts, because that's the only seeming we have, right? If everything we have are seemings, then we're going to base our theories on seemings. And we don't need to suspend judgment, different from the first one. Cestus and Pyrrhus say that we do not need to suspend judgment about everything. We can just live by seemings. We can just live by comprehending how things affect us and never comprehending the things on itself. Why do we need that? And comprehending that you'll never know anything. You only have seemings, and basing your life on those seemings, and always trying to have better seemings and more precise seemings is is very good, because you feel free. Like now you don't need to actually pursue truth and pursue eternal categories. Now you can just comprehend that you live by the things that you feel and the things that you see, and maybe you're wrong, but later you're gonna see that you're wrong and get better seemings one step at a time, right? That's that's actually how empiricism works until today. Like, obviously talking about very broad terms, it follows this tone, right? And it comes from Cestus Empiricus. Then now skepticism is over by now, because, well, as I said, and when I begin talking about skepticism, the whole epistemology is about going against skepticism and trying to prove that skepticism is wrong, and then the skeptics keep saying that the epistemologists are wrong, and then this repeats throughout all the history. So skepticism never actually go away. But by now, we're not going to study it. Then we have Neo-Aristotelianism. This is not very relevant. This is not... I'm sorry. This is very relevant. This is not very new, right? Yeah, the Neo-Aristotelic... I wrote it wrong. I put Neo-Aristotelism. It's Neo-Aristotelianism. Let me fix it. Now it's correct. Neo-Aristotelianism is not going to develop very different theories from like normal Aristotelianism from Aristotle. Actually, the most relevant part is not about philosophy, it's about translation. The Neo-Aristotelian philosophers, they made translations and made copies of Aristotle's books, and this is very relevant, and this is what will make Aristotle still alive until today. Actually, if people weren't making copies and weren't translating the books, we would never have access to that today. And we need to remember that by that time, making a copy of a book were literally writing everything again with the hand, because there were no way to print books. So when a group of academics make copies of a book, it's actually something that worth talking about. That's like a historical relevant fact. They made this copy because now the book has more ways of spreading, and it's really relevant. We're gonna see on medieval philosophy that in the beginning of the medieval era, they make copies of Aristotle's book, and that's basically what is going to make the medieval era be all Aristotelic, right? The scholastic. But we're gonna get into it later. Then the main philosopher of the Neo-Aristotelianism is Alexander from Aphrodisias, and the intellect is divided in material intellect, the capability of thinking, the acquired intellect, the thinking on itself, the thoughts, and active intellect, the connection between the other two, right? That's basic Aristotelic psychology. And we have contact with only with our body and thoughts. The active intellect is not in our soul, right? So the active intellect is both intelligibility on itself and intellect on itself. And that's why it can connect the active and the acquired and the material intellect, because it is pure intellect. So it can be a part of material intellect, and it is pure intelligibility. So it gives the intelligibility that the acquired intellect don't have, and it gives the intellect that the material intellect don't have, right? Oh, I made the exact opposite. It gives the intelligibility that the material intellect don't have, and it gives the intellect that the acquired intellect don't have. I hope I was clear. That this idea is very easy. It's just because the words are, it's wordy, but it's very okay. It's a simple idea. It's just a hard phrase. And being intelligibility and intellect on itself, the active intellect is God, right? And that's a very straightforward understanding of God and of the human soul. It's basically we have a soul and a body, and God makes the connection between soul and body. That's not something that is very new. Yeah, he just brought it to Aristotelianism, right? Bringing God as this element with clear Christian influence, inflation. Oh my God, uh, with clear Christian influence is a pretty common and straightforward idea. And this relation is direct. God directly connects with no means our mind and our ideas, right? Our material capability of comprehending and our forms, our ideas. Because if it were mediated, it would need something to make the connection, and then this relation would need to be direct. So the relation has to be direct because we cannot actually solve this problem. They say that the connection between the thoughts and the capability of thinking cannot be mediated. Then the new Aristotelian puts God as the mean for it, and he says, "Oh, we don't need more means than that because we would be putting more and more means with no reason, right? God already solves the problem." And I'm not going to take long on Neo-Aristotelianism, so let's go to the rising of Platonism, the last topic of our class. And now we're going to talk about Middle Platonism. Middle Platonism is what in the middle between Neoplatonism and Platonism from Plato himself. They see the forms as God's thoughts, and this idea is very, very relevant. You're gonna see God's thoughts, God's thoughts, God's thoughts, God's thoughts during like lots of classes from here. because Christian philosophy really likes this concept of thinking about the forms of stuff as God's thoughts, right? They see it as very, uh, it solves lots of problems because now you don't need anymore to think about God as something that is, personal. God is personal in Christianism. Don't get me wrong, but he solved this problem of like God having a personality and it is disconnected with the world, right? It kind of make the system more coherent, So the ideas they connect this with God's thoughts and make the connection between everything and make the system, the Platonic system, more coherent in general. So point for Middle Platonists. And connecting God and nature, I'm sorry, disconnecting God and nature. Remember that on Stoicism and on Epicureanism, the most relevant theories by that time, God and the nature were like insanely together. They were basically the same thing, and but for the Platonists, it is not right. So they consider that God is transcendental, right? And the Middle Platonists go against nature in order to pursue God. That's really straightforward. They stop thinking that the argument, oh, nature made everything like that, so we should be like that. They stop thinking that it is persuasive at all because, well, simply the good and God can be in a different, dimension, can be beyond nature. We don't need to be defined by nature. Nature is not perfect at all. The thing that is perfect are the ideas. So that's that whole Platonic uh, arguments that you already saw. Then we have Neo-Pythagoreanism, the other important element for Neoplatonism. That when I say rising of Neoplatonism, those theories are not Neoplatonic. They are just the base for Neoplatonism. And Neo-Pythagoreanism says that they argue that the dyad came from the monad, so they put the monad in a very remembering that monad is everything, is the good, is God, is the most high hierarchy on the hyperuranium, and dyad is the other element that creates everything, the element that puts multiple aspects on the monad. That's the dyad between good and bad. No, I'm sorry, between a lot and a little, right? Between big and small. So that's the dyad. They say that the dyad in some way came from the monad, so they consider the monad as a principle that is like more principle than the dyad, and they considering the monad as a true principle of like absolutely everything and everything coming from that is more coherent, as I said. So it's good to if they can argue what is the aspect of the dyad that make us think that it came from the monad, it is very good. So they argue that. And they are quite religious. They're very, connected with faith, and they really see the things in a spiritual way. I don't know how to say that in other words. They're religious, simple. And numbers as the closest path to the hyperuranium. They have this really intense connection with numbers. That's why they are Pythagoreanists, right? Because they connect with numbers in a way that is divine, right? They treat numbers as something that is divine, that's something that is the connection between the human and God, between the human and the hyperuranium. Almost like a Christian talking about Jesus, right? Jesus is a man, but he connects man with God. He is a man and he is God. So they say that the numbers are present on our lives and they are present in the hyperuranium. So they are this gate between mundane world and spiritual divine world. And they have a very important philosopher, which is Numenius, which I'm not going to take long on him. Actually, it is a very, you know, interesting and a very deep philosopher, but Neoplatonism just were simply a better version of his theories. So I don't think, and it came like very close to Neoplatonism. So I don't think we have any good reason to talk about him deeply. We need simply to know that okay, he began the Neoplatonic arguments. He brought up some of those, but that's simply it. He develops a metaphysical system in which the first god relates to the ideas, the second god to cosmos, and the third god acts and move the cosmos. He says that we have God, and then this first aspect of God relates to the ideas because they are eternal, because they are, a perfect, yada yada yada. The second God, the second nature of the God, which comes from the first one, but is not the genuine manifestation of the first one, is the one that is related to the cosmos. Is the one that is related to is basically the demiurge. But the demiurge, on its activity of demiurging, if I could say that, he the activity of demiurging, and I mean moving and actually making the world exist and being the mother of the world. This is the third god because it has movement, right? Movement means imperfection. You need to remember that. Movement means, okay, this was not supposed to be here. Now it's there. Things are supposed to fall, but objects can simply be in the middle of the air, and then it will start to move for it to be in the floor again. So that's movement. Movement is imperfection. Movement is uh, an aspect of the world that is far away from God, far away from the first God. The most genuine expression of God. That's Numenius' theories, and being the base for Neoplatonist theories, those ideas are a bridge between pagan and Christian philosophy. Like, I can't explain Middle Platonism and Neo-Pythagoreanism without saying that it has a lot of Christian influences. Those ideas of God as a main figure and as a main element are related to Christianism. But I cannot. I don't think I should put this together with Neoplatonism because Neoplatonism, like the most important philosopher of pagan Neoplatonism, were actually Christian in during some time of his life. So I don't think it is related enough to Christianism for me to consider it actually a passage between two. They're more pagan than Christian, but they're very influenced by Christian ideas. And that was it. That's our class. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I can see you later. Bye.